Welcome to the TryPod, where we break down the NRL every game, every week from a punting perspective. And tonight, in fact, or this afternoon, we're going to break down the season 2024. It is the NRL 2024 season review, a 10th year of TryPod in the books. I sadly can't say anymore 10 straight years of winning tips. That's not the case for the best bets. I apologize for that. I covered that a little bit in the grand final rapid reaction show itself. But the grand final is a great place to start with my guest joining us in person, I think for the first time this year. Always welcome and always appreciate your time. Tristan, how was the weekend for you, mate?
Yeah, g'day, Jacob. And it was a really, really enjoyable weekend whenever grand finals are around. It's such an exciting weekend. It was a big race day on Saturday. The punters were way too good for us on Saturday, but then Sunday went down to the grand final to watch it. And yeah, it was a cracking game. Obviously, I've always had a soft spot for Penrith, being a Penrith fan before we started our Titans relationship. So that from that side, it was good to go and see a high quality game. Obviously, there's a little bit of controversy there surrounding the Storm try, but I think particularly from the neutral point of view, it was a really quick, high quality game, and it was sort of the final that I think we're all hoping to see, regardless of which way the result fell. But it was a good match.
Yeah, you were at the ground in attendance, weren't you, mate? So how was the atmosphere, and what was your opinion on the controversial try, like in the moment and maybe afterwards after you've seen some replays?
Yeah, the atmosphere was brilliant. It seemed like, probably I was actually at the game last year when the Panthers played the Broncos as well, and it felt like last year.
That had to be a different level last year, though.
It was a different level last year, but then the crowd probably felt like it was, even more so Brisbane-based as opposed to Penrith, which I thought was surprising at the time, considering obviously Penrith being the New South Wales side. But it certainly did feel the crowd was very much on the Panthers side there in attendance. And yeah, watching it live, I was, and obviously you probably don't get as good a view in those moments as what you get and hearing things on the TV, but it did feel like maybe it was based on what the referee had called, which, I've always been of the opinion that maybe the referee had the ability to say, I've got no opinion, and then it just comes down to purely what the video referee thinks, as opposed to having to go off call when the ref may not have seen exactly what they thought they saw. But then in hindsight, then you see the replays the next day and there's a completely different angle. So it was funny where, I think there was a lot of outrage after the game, and then maybe the next day people have had a chance to look at it when they've cooled down, and maybe it seemed like it was the right call. So, but it was certainly very, very tight either way, and it was a massive moment of the game, because if Melbourne scored there, then you never know what could have happened.
That's right. It would have been level scores, a kick to go in front. But I'm in that boat of I changed my opinion the next day. So I did the recap. So I just wanted to clarify my thoughts. I said Sunday night, based not so much on what I saw live, but on the screenshots that were going around social media, I said the bunker got that wrong. I think it was a try. And then when I saw it on the Monday, I actually think my eyes had deceived me there. And I was seeing that white forearm of Jack Howarth as an extension of the ball. And I saw that in the slow motion replay and in the still appear to come down and press on the ground. But when you marry it up with the other angle, I do believe that was arm under the ball. It gave me a little bit of peace of mind that bunker got it right. It's a very important decision to get right, because you don't know how the game could have gone afterwards. So I even admit I was wrong. I think the bunker was right. But I put a post in the group and still many others disagree. I guess that's the beauty of footy. But give us the betting wash up, mate. How did you guys go in terms of who was the worst way, the head-to-head? Low scoring probably helped you out with less SGMs. And what was the action like for the Clive Churchill?
Yeah, so we were going into the game in a pretty awkward spot, because both Melbourne and Penrith were losers for us throughout the whole final series. So we were hoping for an upset in the lead up, and that obviously didn't occur. So going into the game, we knew we had our backs up against the wall to get a result, and I sort of thought, well, we've got two ways to go here, that we maybe really push one of the teams and make one of the teams a winner and make one of the teams a loser, or we just let it sort of naturally transpire, which we end up doing the latter. And it was amazing that the betting on the game itself, once we got into match day, and it was probably, I think I articulated it in our pre-show video on Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever it was, that I did feel like there were so many differing opinions for that game that everyone was going to have a different view of it, and that's exactly how the betting fell. There was, come game time, the the stand on the book itself was very minimal. There was a lot of activity on the game, but we didn't have a huge position either way, which actually made watching the game probably a lot more enjoyable from my standpoint. You could just watch it for what it was. There was a little bit of a push for us on the overs, and then obviously the same game multis. Then a lot of them were eliminated on the back of not many try scorers. So from that perspective, we end up breaking square on the result overall, which I was very happy with that from our perspective going into the game with a bit of a problem there. And also the Clive Churchill was Liam Martin was about $34 in it, and that was probably where we did see a significant push, where the vast majority of the money was for Storm players in that market. And then obviously Cleary was the best supported for the Panthers. But in terms of Martin, I think we took a handful of bets on him, but certainly nothing that was sizable, and that resulted in a decent outcome for us.
So you would have been relieved because Cleary was in the mix. I also thought could have got it. So Martin was a good result for you?
Yes, yeah, it was, and it was one of those ones where it was such a good low-scoring game that there was probably no massive standouts, and sometimes you sort of wonder if maybe in that instance they do go for a player that maybe hasn't won it before or whatever the story is. But I genuinely thought if Penrith won with the way Cleary had to get through with his shoulder, I thought he would be the standout, and it wasn't to be. But that's how the market unfolded our side.
Yeah. Especially the fact that Nathan has already got two. He probably had to be head and shoulders. Did miss a couple of goal kicks, I suppose, if I have to nitpick. So you broke even kind of head to head. I just want to double check that because I actually saw initially when you guys put the grand final up on the Saturday night on the result of the prelims, you were $1.90 each side. By Sunday, you were $1.85 Storm. By kickoff, you might know better than me, but I feel like Melbourne was the high $70s. So it appeared like money kept coming for the Storm, but not a great deal.
And you've got to look at it in a couple of ways. Like obviously, when we take our bets, there's you've got to move the price accordingly, and probably from our perspective, that the sharper side of the money was maybe on the Storm side, and then the recreational money was probably more on the Panthers side. So we were making market moves on the back of some customers that we consider that are generally sharp, and we move on the back of that action. And then, we were getting a similar amount of money on the Panthers, and we were also pushing that because our traders probably had the opinion at that point that they were probably, if anything, trying to side with the Storm with the way the market was sort of heading. So that was how it unfolded. Generally when the market shifts one way or the other, you do get your stand moves with it. But because the weight of money normally occurs in that last hour, we did take a decent amount of money at the Panthers in that last sort of 20, 30-minute window where we were very comfortable with where the market was positioned. So in that perspective, it did make a pretty balanced book, despite there being a very strong move in the marketplace for the Storm.
Oh, that makes sense. And do you feel like the sharp punters and the bookies got it wrong? I've heard people say that after the game, which it is easy to say afterwards. How was Penrith an outsider in this one? Like, we've just seen them win 4 comps, but how would you respond to that?
Yeah, and obviously the proof's in the pudding. The Panthers end up winning the game, and they got the result. I think probably, maybe what there was obviously doubt over Cleary's shoulder as much as Penrith were coming out and suggesting that he was 100%, and maybe he was. Yeah. But I think that's probably what a lot of people were working on, that he needed to have a very, very good game for Penrith to win. And even if he did, maybe with the way the Storm players were playing, it still may not have been good enough. So I think that's what a lot of the marketplace money was heading towards. I mentioned it on the Tuesday show that I sort of felt that if you like the overs, you probably like the Melbourne side, and if you like the unders, you probably like the Panthers side. And because the overs was shifting outwards, and a lot of our punters were also on that option, then that probably contributed to where that flow of money was heading to as well. But yeah, in hindsight, the Panthers players were right. I always like to look at a game afterwards and say, was this market correct or was it not? If you played this game 100 times again, do you feel Penrith would win that more than what the market indicated? And yeah, I probably think if you played that exact same game 100 times, then maybe Penrith win it more than the 50% or even less that they needed to where the market was sitting.
I think that's fair. I think if you replayed it again, well, knowing what we know now, Penrith would start favourite. But part of it is we know that Cleary got through the game, and we also just saw an all-time defensive display, which is the craziest standout to me, that Melbourne team scored for fun all season long with the stars they had in the form that they came into the game in. And they were so restricted, Melbourne, the whole night. And that's, what wins competitions. Whether the Warbrick try counted or not, ultimately, Melbourne couldn't score enough points to win the game. Penrith were the better team on the day, and 4 in a row is just an unprecedented achievement. And I wanted to ask you, like, kind of from a punting context, if I could go back in time 4 years, and I could ask you, what odds can I get on Penrith to win 4 comps in a row? Could you roughly give me a price to give people an idea of what a long shot that truly is?
Yeah, well, and I reckon it's a funny one, because I reckon if you had have asked that question 4 years ago, and obviously it's a very easy starting base to work out what price they would be to win that first comp, which they were around about the $6 mark when they won the first comp 4 years ago. I actually think you'd probably have a shorter quote realistically than what they ended up being, because you weren't to know 4 years ago that they were going to lose the magnitude of players that what they did, which makes the effort even more impressive. Because I would be of the opinion that if a side won 3 comps in a row, they go into the last year, $2.50 shot, something in that vicinity. We already know that they've gone into next year as second favourites, despite winning 4 years in a row, and that's because of the fact they're losing so many players. So they were about $6. They were then $5. They were $4.60 and about $4.60 in the 4 years, from my quick look at it. So they're probably around about 500 or 600 to 1 to win it 4 years in a row. And I think if you looked at it from here, what price would Penrith be to do another 4? Well, they're probably going to even be higher than that 600 to 1. Probably the best example might be Melbourne, where they are favourites going into this season. Obviously, there's been a lot of parallels to when Penrith lost the comp 5 years ago, that Melbourne might go on a similar run. So, but even then, with the salary cap era, if they win a couple of comps in a row, then it is going to be a lot harder to keep all those players. So I think around that 500 or 600 to 1 mark for a favoured team is probably around about right, which just makes the achievement so phenomenal.
Yeah, if you told me 4 years ago that Penrith's going to win 4 comps in a row, I would have said, no, they're not. No one is. But if you're telling me they are, then everyone must take unders and they must keep this squad together. But as you say, the fact that they've lost like 7 or 8 high-caliber players and coaches as well along the way and still won it each year is just ridiculous. But would you give punters, you wouldn't give 500 to 1 today if someone wanted Melbourne to win the next 4 comps? Or would you give a little shorter than that because there is actually a possibility Melbourne keeps the team together?
Yeah, you would. With any of those rougher options, you do need to price them on the earth conservatively. So you certainly you would price it with a little bit of fat in it, I'd imagine, but probably realistically for them to go and do it, they're a 500 to 1 shot to go and do it from now. So you probably would price it, because if they were to win this year and they were to keep all their players together, then you may be looking at what I sort of thought Penrith might have been 4 years ago. If you asked that question, maybe they're $4 into $3.50 into $3.50 into $3, because you're also probably then factoring to Penrith become weaker because they are a clear second pick in the market at the moment. So there are a lot of variables that go into it, but yeah, I would suggest if you're putting that market up, it's around that sort of 300 to 1 mark, I suggest. But probably realistically, if you wanted to get a decent price, you'd probably need about 500s.
So very unlikely we see it again in our lifetime. I did a quick calc of like, what's the odds of winning 8 Origin series in a row? And I think also factoring in that if a team starts winning a few, you have to make them shorter each year because they must have a stacked lineup. And I came out at maybe that's like an 80 to 1 or something like that. By the time you get to the final series, you might be $1.50. So historically, we might never see that again either. But winning 4 comps in a row is even crazier.
Yeah, well, and obviously, like they just said, it's still very hard to win 8 Origins in a row. But the difference is there, you're not impacted by the salary cap because you can keep that team together. Whereas that's been just the massive achievement with what Penrith's done. And yeah, it's just phenomenal. And it just speaks to how good a coach Ivan Cleary is.
And I don't want to take away from Penrith. I'm truly blown away by them. They've done what's nearly impossible. I will just add this. 4 straight comps, people will say after the fact that team was unbeatable. So I just make this point. Penrith was an underdog in a prelim or a grand final, and I'm talking live betting as well, every single time they won the comp. In 2021, Penrith was a converted try underdog in the prelim to Melbourne and won that. In 2022, Penrith was down 12-0 in the prelim to Souths, so they would have been a live underdog in the betting. 23, of course, they were a live underdog against Brisbane, down 24-8. And on Sunday, not only did Penrith go into the game as an underdog, they were down 6-0. So I don't know if you would have known, you were at the game, but Storm might have got under $1.50 live or thereabout at 6-0.
Yeah, well, they were $1.75, I think, to start the game, and yeah, I would suggest they would have gone $1.45, $1.50, something in that vicinity. When they went 6-0 up, because it probably felt, being at the game as well, that maybe arguably Penrith were the team on top, and then Melbourne scored the try, and that's when you think, oh, the floodgates might open here, and they might just continue, similar to what Brisbane did over that window, but it wasn't to be. But yeah, I think around about that $1.50 mark would have been where they got to.
And the total was 40 going into the game, but there were no points in the first 23 minutes or 20 minutes. So 6-0 was an even bigger magnitude lead, albeit it was short-lived when the Storm dropped the ball next set, and then Penrith responded. I gave you another fun proposition, Nathan Cleary. If you had to set his over-under total premierships he wins for his career, and you're going to let me bet over or under at even money, then how many is Nathan kind of in line to win?
Yeah, well, I actually maybe misinterpreted this question, but it still adds to a funny dynamic. So we can look at it two ways. I actually, when you said how many premierships does the Clearys win, I combined the two, which obviously at the moment sits at 4 apiece with Nathan and Ivan both winning 4, and I think that adds an extra layer to the discussion, which we can sort of look at it on both ways. You've got to look at how long you expect Nathan to continue to play for in the NRL, and Ivan to coach for, and Nathan's he's 26 at the moment. He's won his 4 comps. Probably the thing that you've got to consider is he's had a lot of injuries at a young age. Will that compound on him? Like, we know what a legend Joey Johns was playing, but he was forced to retire reasonably early. And you look at other halfbacks like your DCE, who just continues to be able to defy father time, but he's been very fortunate from the injury front. So, that's the question you got to make. Then there's always that ongoing rumour about, obviously, with his relationship, if maybe he goes over to the Super League at some point over in the UK. I probably don't think that's going to happen, but you never know. And family does some funny things at times. But I sort of worked on maybe him winning 2 more comps in his career, and I think you'd either set the market at 5.5 short of the overs or 6.5 short of the unders if you're doing it purely on Nathan's number. I think the realistic expectation that if whatever Nathan does, Ivan doubles in that window, because I can't see a world in Nathan playing for a different NRL side than what Ivan's coaching just at the moment. Then you have to then work out how long will Ivan continue to coach for? You've got Bellamy's 65, Ivan's 53, and Bennett's 74. So, he's probably got at least another 10 years. Does he want to continue on once Nathan retires as well? I would probably think if I was setting a market on it, I reckon he might have 5 years left in him after Nathan finishes to try to prove that he can do it without Nathan. So I then think maybe he's realistically a chance of winning a premiership in that period as well. So I'd probably set the combined line at 13.5, but I wouldn't have a huge amount of confidence. But that's where I'd be putting a number at with all of that rationale in.
That is fascinating. I came up, first of all, people will all want to take the overs naturally. I think if you just talk about Nathan, you say he's got 4, and if you said you were going to let people bet over under 5.5, you did say over would be a favourite. But most people probably thinking right now, we're in this moment, that Nathan's going to win 6, 7, 8. No one seems to be able to stop him, and a lot of people will pick Penrith next year. I also thought 6.5 would be the right number for Nathan, total career premierships. And I thought give him 10 more years. He's 26 now, and give him a 20% chance each year. I guess that's another 2 comps. So I also thought Nathan might win about 2 more. You mentioned, what could family do? Does he end up in the Super League? How about this? His partner, Mary, is half Papua New Guinean. They're going to have a new team. So maybe Nathan could go and be the king of PNG and help that team win a premiership. Or when Perth comes in, you throw a blank checkbook at Ivan and Nathan to go over there, in the twilight of Nathan's career and start something there. So who knows? Just one more thing. You mentioned Joey Johns, but Nathan, is Nathan Cleary the best you've ever seen? Or you couldn't quite say that yet?
I couldn't say it yet. I think he has the potential to be the best we've seen. I think in order to do that, he probably needs to dominate the origin scene, which we haven't quite seen just yet. I think what he's done in club level is phenomenal. And the Broncos game last year, to be able to do it under adversity this year with the injuries, absolutely phenomenal performance. And if he plays 10 years like you suggest, I think there's got to be a big doubt over that, in my opinion. I worry when players continue. It's not a one-off that he's been hurt this year, which is a shame, and you'd hate to see injury curtail his career, but I'd be surprised if he can get through that 10-year mark. I also think there's a big opportunity that he goes to one of those other clubs, which would be a brilliant legacy as well. The realistic chance of one of them winning a comp is probably unlikely in its early days, but you never know, and it would be we saw what Preston Campbell, Scotty Prince did come into the Gold Coast. So, but yeah, if he could play 10 years longer, and if he was guaranteed to playing 10 years longer, I would certainly have the line at 6.5. The reason I put it at 5.5 is I don't think he'll play that long, unfortunately. But if he gets to 10 years, then I'll be very, very confident he'll be as close as we can see to the best of all time.
I mean, there's a wild card in there, like the Wallabies come in and trying to give him $10 million or something and say, come and save us. And I wouldn't doubt him either. I've talked about how we need to appreciate Nathan Cleary as if we're watching Michael Jordan in his prime. That's how I feel when I watch him play. And Nathan's 26, he's won 4 premierships. Michael Jordan, who won 6 championships, had none at this age. So the best was yet to come for Michael Jordan at that age. That's a scary thought. I do agree with what you're saying about Nathan's injuries. The promising thing is that these days we do see athletes have that greater longevity. I know quarterbacks in the NFL don't take the rigors as much as a rugby league player, but we've seen primes extended, across various sports because of just due to, sports science and stuff. So that's what we love to see. That's what we hope, that we can see these great players for as long a time as possible. Thanks to everyone who's tuning in live. I know we've kind of dropped this show on you impromptu. Just thought get it in early. People will find it when they do. Feel free to let us know your own highlights, lowlights of the season as we go through them, and fire in any questions for Tristan if you got any. Tristan, if we look back at the start of 2024, let me start asking you this. Was it a profitable season overall, and relative to other recent seasons, how did you guys actually fare?
Yeah, so compared to last year, and it's always best to look at it year on year, like as we've spoken about multiple times, we've had to make some changes to our business model, and we didn't have to make too many massive changes from 2023 to 2024. So it was a decent comparison. Our turnover was down 20% year on year, and that's been consistent with a lot of other sports, a lot of racing and those sorts of things. Just there's a lot of macroeconomic factors that go into it at the moment. It's a very competitive marketplace. So we got our nose in front, but it wasn't as sizable as what it was last year, and where we did have a strong season last year. So it was something certainly not going to complain about. But the turnover was down, the margin was down a little bit, and what we did find though, that the turnover, whilst it was down, the multi turnover went from 13% to 15%. So we saw an increase in multi turnover, which is probably consistent with what we're seeing. I do find a lot of the bigger punters now, with just the way the economy is, that they're probably shifting to maybe having a few smaller bets to give themselves an interest over the weekend and shifting to multi. So we have seen a transition in that, and it felt like there was as much interest as what we've seen in other years, and it was a really positive outcome from that front.
Would a little bit of that be deliberate, the lower turnover, because I think it was the first year without $2 lines, or maybe you cut them last year, and even the $1.93s late in the piece, like those probably soak up a bit of turnover.
Yeah, you always lose track of where everything falls, but we made our big raft of changes there last year, and we ran a pretty consistent strategy, and we might have done that maybe
from last year.
Yes, yeah, I think so. I actually can't remember, but I think we might have made some sizable changes in the middle part of 2023. So maybe for the front end of the season, there was we still ran some of those more aggressive items, but yeah, we I think that's a key aspect of where we're heading to as an industry and a business at the moment, is that we've seen some positivity in where the marketplace and the thought process of some of the powers that be. We haven't necessarily reached a point where there's been a lot of relief on the tax front, but we're starting to see some positive discussions in that front. Like we were expecting there was an increase in point of consumption in Victoria, which is one of the big taxes we see. That went from 10 to 15%. We knew about that. we were also anticipating an increase in New South Wales point of consumption from 10 to 15, which didn't occur. So it stayed, from 15 to 20, it stayed at 15. So we're finally having a little bit of success in there where I think the racing bodies and the sporting bodies understand that in order to generate turnover, we need to be able to bet aggressive products and be able to shift the focus just away from, solely on multis and get punters back to that $1.93, $2 markets. Like, it drives turnover in a lot of different fronts. And you'll see we're trying a few things over the spring carnival to prove that point. So from that side of it, it's been positive, and we're looking at ways to scale turnover back up for the 2025 year as well. So it hasn't been done yet in terms of massive positivity on that front, but it's certainly the discussions turning, which is good to see.
It's awesome to get the bookmaker insights as well. I've got a couple more questions about that, but just looking over the 2024 season, then I wonder if you did get a chance to look back at your book and kind of we can view some of the big bets before the year and then discuss how they went. Were there any significant bets for certain teams to make or miss top 4, top 8, the spoon or anything else like any of the player markets?
It was funny. At the start of the year, we didn't see massive. We saw a lot of activity on those top 4, top 8 wooden spoon markets. We didn't have any really big, sizable, scary bets. Like, there was just a constant flow of punters sort of obviously being very engaged and involved. But basically, the wash up for all of those markets at the end of the piece was we broke about square on all of them, and there weren't any massive swings. It wasn't a case of if one side snuck in or one side fell out, it was going to be a sizably different result. I know there's been a story thrown around. I think the Daily Telegraph did it through Phil Rothfield. Saturday they broke it where Singo had a sizable bet on Penrith with us. We had $100K at $4 on the Panthers. So obviously I can't go into individual accounts, but that's what was reported, and that was by far and away our biggest bet throughout the course of the season. So that was the one that sort of why we went into the game with a pretty ugly position, because we'd been laying Melbourne throughout the course of the year at the much bigger price as well. So that was probably the premiership was where we held the most of our activity, and then the other ones, you generally take a lot of activity on those $2 shots to 180 to 220 teams, and we did take sizable action there, but just no massively big bets, which really skewed things too much.
Fair enough. Do you remember your biggest win or wins of the year in terms of probably individual games where you did have a really lopsided result and it went your way? Yeah.
The games themselves are where you where we did have some big swings throughout the course of the year, and I actually remember probably our second best result of the season was the last regular season game between the Knights and the Dolphins, and that was by far and away our biggest. I won't say our biggest hold, because sometimes you get some big holds on short price teams, but when that game was reasonably close to pick 'em, it was just all one-way traffic for the Dolphins in that game, and there was much more engagement on a regular season game than I've seen for so long, with all the implications around which side won. Obviously the excitement, two teams that I think a lot of people enjoyed watching as well. So every bit of action for us was Dolphins based. All the exotics were Dolphins based. The totals fell in the right spot. The try scorers fell in the right spot. It was just the perfect outcome for us, which finished the season on a high, which was good. And then the other really good result was actually the Broncos-Bulldogs game in round 21, where I think at that point, the Broncos, everyone was expecting the Broncos just to put a number on the Bulldogs. The Bulldogs been a little bit wobbly in the lead up, or perceived to be a little bit wobbly in the lead up. I think they might have been missing a couple of players as well. But then we saw what happened. The Bulldogs just ripped them to shreds, and there were so many multis running through the short price Broncos options. I think we might have had a really big bit of action on the unders as well, because I think people expected the Bulldogs to still be reasonably good defensively. But those two results were by far and away our best results throughout the course of the season.
Jeez, I was on Brisbane that Arvo. I think Brisbane finally got all the Origin stars back, and they'd had a rest. It was must win. It was at Suncorp. Crichton was out. Unders was hitting nearly every game for Bulldogs games, and it ends up 41-16 to the Dogs. So that was pretty surprising. At least it was a positive for you. For me, not as many highlights as I was hoping for. I would say my best wins were probably same game multis. I actually had 150-1 winner in the forum, but that doesn't count officially. But that game was Sharks 51 plus over the Tigers on a Friday night, where the Sharks scored like final play to win by 52. I tipped Wally Lewis, the Wally Lewis medal, Mitchell Moses at 200-1. That was close, but you don't get any prizes for being close. So that actually kind of goes in the category of a painful loss. How about you? I'm sure punters will like to hear some of your worst losses of 2024 as well.
Yeah, I'm sure the punters prefer to hear that more so than the other side. So we had 3 genuine strip out days or results, and 2 of them I remember vividly. The third one, I was going through the data leading into this just to make sure I had it right, and it sort of caught me by surprise when I looked at it, but it was sort of a combination of a few things. But one of our worst results of the season was the Roosters Manly game in the second week of the finals, where we had a stack of multis from the Sharks to beat the Cowboys into the Roosters. They were absolutely backed off the map, the Roosters, and that was one of those ones where we spoke about the grand final. It was just weight of money both ways. The Sharps were on the Roosters, the sizable recreational money was on the Roosters as well, and it was funny watching the game. I knew we were in a lot of trouble early on in the piece, but it was quite low scoring for a period of time, and then late it just blew out, and every try scorer we didn't want happened to lob. And I remember sitting there, and anyone on Dom Young can thank me for this, because one of my mates had a multi and it was blowing up, and with 2 minutes to go, I was winding him up a little bit about Dom Young not scoring when everyone else has, and then lo and behold, Joey Manu could have scored himself and threw it out to Dom Young, and that just was the anchor leg of every same game we rode on the day, and it was a tough finish to the Saturday afternoon. And then the other one, which brings back a few bad memories as well, being a proud Queenslander, was Origin Game 2, where New South Wales just absolutely rolled through us. There was just a truckload of money for the New South Wales side in the lead up. Again, high scoring match where you're not expecting it to be, and all the multis rolling through, and a lot of those premier players scoring for New South Wales. And I think the man of the match, it was Mitch Moses that got the man of the match.
Yeah.
I remember that being a really ugly result as well. So it's like you get through all the damage, a little bit in reverse to what happened in the grand final, where you get the cherry on top with Liam Martin winning, where you don't have much action, but when everything goes pear-shaped, you get the cherry on top with Mitch Moses getting it as well. So that was a really ugly one. And then the one that caught me by surprise, which I only noticed when I went through this, was actually in round 14 on a Sunday, where Melbourne beat Newcastle and Penrith beat Manly. And it wasn't one result that was bad, but just every single result throughout the course of the day, it was multis into same game multis. And it was our worst day over the course of the season by a long, long, long way. And they were both reasonably close games in the end. I think there were 8 points between them. But I think there was some live betting where we got middled, and it was just one of those days where we couldn't do anything right. And that was our worst day by a long way. That was the Sunday in round 14.
I think I recall that where Newcastle were actually kind of close, but gave up a try right on the stroke of half time and just couldn't hold on in the end. Of course, I'm on the other side of the counter, so a couple of your worst losses. We did tip New South Wales in game 2, tipped Cronulla second week of the finals into the Roosters. So at least that's fond memories for me. But I've got some painful ones too. I've got a fair few that I don't really want to go over, all the kind of backdoor losses. There's one where I look back now and my best bet was Melbourne -3.5 home to Brisbane. That's a pretty good bet, right? And no Reece Walsh. And Melbourne's up 8 with a minute to go. But then, of course, Brisbane scores. Melbourne only wins by 2. But other games that I could say were my most painful or my worst losses were just ones that I got completely wrong. I mean, I can recall tipping Cronulla at home to Penrith, and Cronulla was a favourite. There was no Nathan Cleary, but it didn't stop Penrith winning 42-0. On another occasion, I tipped the Warriors to beat your Titans, and the Titans, of course, won 66-6. And so if Gold Coast played a little bit more like that, maybe my top 4, Titans top 4 at 11s, which everyone remembers. And I want to emphasize, it was at 11-1. So it's not meant to win or meant to win easy. But I saw this roadmap with the Gold Coast. It was a team that was probably a little better than people knew because they blew a lot of leads last year. It was a team with a new coach that can always get that bump. There was a bit of young talent there. I thought the Titans had elite middles. It doesn't help when you lose Tino a few minutes into game 2, right? But But where do you think it all went wrong this year for the Gold Coast?
Yeah, and as you say, like $11 shot, you meant to win. One in 10 of those bets to break square.
If you win 1 in 10, yeah.
Yeah, and I felt very bullish going into the season. Obviously, there's a little bit of bias from my side, of course, but every bit of murmuring coming out of the camp was of optimism and positivity, and I think Desi, to be fair, sort of suggested even in all of the pre-season side of things that he would expect it to take 4 weeks before that side sort of showed where they were heading to, and they had a very, very sluggish start to the season. That's where it all went wrong. Obviously, you couple that with Tino, they seemed to lose just players continually throughout the course of that early part of the year, and they just couldn't get any momentum going. And the shuffling of AJ and Jaden Campbell and Keanu Kinney, who turned out to be a really massive find. They just couldn't get any consistency in those 3 guys playing together and finding out where the best spot in the team was. So I think it was just, starting the season was at 0-7, I think it was. And then from there, they were just constantly chasing their tail. They probably arguably had a couple of rough calls go against them in a few of those games. And then that middle part of the year, I thought they looked really good. I thought there was a lot of positivity surrounding it. And, even when they beat the Broncos, they were a genuine chance of making the finals. Lose a game, and then all of a sudden the back end of the season fell off again. But I feel like next year, if they can get that combination of AJ, Keanu and Jaden into a spot where they can all be positive contributors to the team, as well as the Tino coming back and RCG, because I think they did get run through the middle a little bit, and hopefully having those 2 guys back will be a big benefit for them next year.
Because you don't have any major losses, really, and I'm trying to think of significant gains. The X factor there is Carter Gordon from rugby, whether he slots into your halves. But other than that, you've got a lot of players that still are trending upwards in their career.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. I think they've got a very settled squad. I think Isaac Liu's going to the Super League. Been a very solid player for a long period of time, but no doubt at the back end of his career. And he was a good solid player, but he was probably forced to play prop for a number of games, which RCG at prop compared to Clark, I think is an upgrade. And then Carter Gordon coming in, and then Tino back. It's if he can go back to how he performed, and then hopefully just if Keanu can maintain his progress, and you get AJ and Jaden sort of being positive contributors, then there is a bit of excitement there if they can have a really strong off season. They know what to expect now from Des, and hopefully they can hit the ground running in week 1 as opposed to that sluggish start like we saw this year.
And if I ask you your personal highlight of the year, then does it involve the Titans?
It does. It involves the Titans Warriors, but not the game you referred to. We actually organised a trip with the Titans at the start of the season to go over and watch the game on Anzac Day. It was one of the most moving games I've ever been part of, because the Warriors, it's been forever since they had a game at home on Anzac Day. Obviously, historically, they'd played the Storm on that day, and it was a sellout crowd, as they did throughout the vast majority of the season. I think all games the Warriors sold out, which was great. But, it was just a massive event to go over there, and going over, it was you went over with, I think 0-7 start to the season, Warriors playing pretty well. I feared what the result was going to be, but I thought it was going to be an enjoyable trip nonetheless. And to go there and watch the Titans put in their best performance of the year, in my opinion, under all the adversity, hold off a rampant Warriors side in that last 10 minutes and be able to defend their way to victory, it was just such a great night, which was something I really enjoyed. And that was by far and away the best moment of the season from a footy fan's point of view.
I predicted you would say that one. I think the Titans were 15-point underdogs, down 12-0 early, and it's the first time New Zealand's hosted an Anzac Day. And I was thinking of you, thinking it's going to be a long afternoon for Tristan. Next thing, the Titans scored 27 straight points, and it's something like 27-12, but it's still a nervous finish because then the Warriors scored 2 or 3 late tries, and you only cling on to win by 3. It was truly a very, very gutsy win. And after you'd actually had some gutsy performances earlier, think of a Golden Point loss in Canberra, a 2-point loss to Melbourne, something like that, where just let them slip. And I thought it was going to happen again, but you held on and got a deserved victory there. My highlight probably has to be the Dolphins winning the Battle of Brisbane for the first time. That was awesome. That was one of the main objectives for Wayne Bennett. they came so close to the finals, as you talked about, round 27, but at least they got that win over Big Brother. Just another note on 2024. Something that I heard over and over this week, I probably even said it myself, but it was a Panthers Storm grand final, and everybody kept saying these were the best two teams all year. And something kept ticking in my head, like, they weren't the best two teams all year. The Roosters were right there, but I've had Roosters bias all year. I don't know if it's just me. I just wanted to ask you, can you confirm that at stages of the season, the Roosters were shorter in premiership odds than the Panthers? And I'd like to ask, how well backed were the Chooks throughout the year?
Yeah, and not only that, the Broncos started the season season shorter than Penrith, I believe, as well, without having the notes in front of me. But certainly the Roosters got into favouritism pretty late in the season, and the Panthers at one point, well, not even one point, with 2 or 3 rounds to go in the season, looked like they were going to finish 4th. The Sharks just had to win out in a pretty straightforward draw. The Roosters, same sort of thing. They had a pretty straightforward draw, and we obviously saw what happened in that nightmare game for them against the Raiders, where Sam Walker went down, Brandon Smith went down, and Victor Radley. I know Victor Radley ended up coming back, but it was just a nightmare from there. I think they blew from $3.30 out to $7 or $8 on the back of that loss, something in that sort of ballpark. So yeah, the Roosters were, for us, they were our knight in shining armour, where we were left with them as a good result throughout the course of the season, and I thought they were a big chance at that point to, as you know, we were in a bad position on both the Storm and the Panthers, and I was quite confident sitting in that position. I thought the way they're playing, they had that excitement about, and they looked like they're building that momentum. They were able to put teams to the sword, and then obviously the injuries went against them. So certainly Penrith and Melbourne weren't the best two teams all year. There's absolutely no way that can be the case. But could the Roosters have, even at their best, matched it with the performances Penrith and Melbourne put in those last 2 or 3 weeks? That's probably the thing that's debatable, because we saw the level Penrith went to. That was their best game of the year in the grand final. The Storm were brilliant. They probably didn't play their best game in the grand final. If they went far away, then they would have beaten a lot of sides, a lot of very good sides with that performance. So for whatever reason, the Roosters just haven't. The other two teams got the wood on them at the moment, and that's something they're going to have to address in the off-season, because they're obviously losing a few players as well. But I'm sure Robbo won't be overly impressed with that. But yeah, certainly at various points throughout the course of the year, the Roosters were in the market.
Whereas it's hard to see them doing that next year, as you talk about the guys that the Roosters are going to lose, as well as the guys that are injured and won't get back till like July, August next year. Maybe it's fair to say Panthers and Storm were the best two teams because they finished 1-2. So by that metric, but I'm with you as well, with a round to go or 2 rounds to go. If everyone won as a favourite, it would have been Melbourne versus Penrith in week 1 of the finals, which would have made it very tough for the side that lost that to, go back around and win the comp. So that's what the Roosters had going for them, all before that fateful afternoon against the Raiders, that is anyway. We'll talk about 2025 markets briefly, but still on this season, are there any teams that jump out to you that you misjudged or kind of got wrong in your ratings?
Yeah, I still can't pick the Dolphins, and I've got absolutely no idea how they're going to go next year. Like they just showed an enormous amount of guts in moments of adversity. Then times when you expected them to go well, they put in some ordinary performances. It was something that, they're the team for the last 2 years have been by far and away the worst, hardest team for us to judge. And now going into the next season, like they've got all these positive traits where they find a way to perform under adversity. They're probably strengthening their squad again. They've got some players coming back from injury, but then they lose Wayne Bennett. And has he been the glue holding that together? Who knows? So they're going to be a really interesting team on where they get priced for those top 8 markets, wooden spoon markets, miss the 8. So they're the team that we still battle to price up. And then the other team that I just expected at some point through the year for the Rabbitohs to be able to flick the switch and to put in some good efforts, and they just couldn't do it. And we probably gave them chances in games where they didn't get close, and that'd be the other side. That obviously the back end of the year we probably changed our mind on that, but we probably held on to it for a little bit longer than maybe what we should have, because they were pretty woeful all year. They did have a few injury concerns, but you look back, and I think we might have even discussed on this show last year with obviously some inner turmoil with the Burgess situation and JD, and it would appear in hindsight that those things haven't been resolved, and there's probably still plenty of work to do when Wayne gets there.
There's so many teams from this year that you can say should be better next year, though. Like, so what did the Rabbitohs ended up finishing probably fourth last, or maybe bottom four, but there's no way with the roster they've got and with Bennett there that they should be
second last.
What they come in the end?
Second last, yeah.
Oh, second last because Para was in the Spoon Bowl, but Para actually leapfrogged the Bunny. So, yeah, second last, but you know that they should be better. So we'll get to kind of spoon odds for next year. But in terms of teams I've misjudged, actually Souths I did okay because I steered off them early in the year when they were, I don't know if you were aware, Souths dating back to 2023, lost against the spread about 15 or 16 weeks in a row until just about Magic round this year where they covered against the Cowboys and then won a few games. But I was actually willing to back Souths when they finally came good. Then I thought Souths might make the 8, but Souths fell away again when the Latrell got injured and Murray got suspended, I think. Just other teams I got wrong. There's a few. I feel like I trusted Cowboys a bit too much early. Now, here's one for you. I was all about fading Brisbane this year, and ironically, I've still somehow come out behind in Brisbane games. I reckon I got burned that many times by Brisbane, going against Brisbane in the first half of this year, and Brisbane kept winning and scoring fluky tries, and I kept saying, this just seems unsustainable. You can't keep having the opponent about to score and cough up the ball to you and you go 80 metres and score, and everyone's telling me, oh, they've just got the athletes, that's how they play, they're going to outscore everyone. And it kind of came back around, but I don't feel like I profited enough on that. I feel like I thought the bottom two teams this year might be the Raiders and Dragons. They both outperformed my assessment multiple times. And then you said the Dolphins, and that is true, even for me being a Dolphins fan. But the Warriors are in that basket as well for me. You could never predict, like, when they were set up to do well, they would fail, and when they were not likely to win, they'd succeed. I reckon, how often does a team have more head-to-head wins when they were an underdog than they do when they were a favourite, right? That's pretty rare, but that was the case for the Warriors. Now, speaking of markets next year, you said to me you would have the West Tigers as favourites for the Spoon. I have got your odds I can put up, and I think West are the longest odds to win the comp. That's even with Luai coming in. So that's crazy that they are sort of favourites to do their own four-peat. But could you kind of justify that? I suppose the best argument is, if not West, then who would win the Spoon next year?
And I think we're going to have one of the best betting markets, for a long time in that Wooden Spoon. It's a one no one wants to win that market. But just having a look at the premiership, we've got 8 teams from 26 to 41, with the Tigers being $41. We've got 3 teams at 34, the Raiders, the Titans, the Dolphins, Parramatta and the Dragons at 31, and then Warriors and Knights at 26. And, probably historically you'd have a team at 100 to 1 to win the comp, which we haven't. We got the Tigers because there is that optimism. They've got some good young kids coming through. Jerome Luai goes there. They've picked up a few other decent additions too, so that they're most certainly going to improve. I just look at all the other sides and, the teams down near the bottom, like Parramatta and the Rabbits, I would expect they're both going to improve. The Titans, I would hope that they're going to improve, and I think they are going to improve. And then you probably look at those sides that you touched on that you had down near the bottom, the Dragons and the Raiders. Well, they're definitely a chance to regress, but they both got close to making the 8 as well. Did they regress far enough to drop out? Which sort of almost brings me back to the Dolphins, which you won't like to hear, but I think they've got the biggest window of variance in this off season, because if they can continue to play at the level that they have over the last couple of years, with some more additions, like they're such a resilient, gutsy side, then they're a big chance of making the 8. But if it has been the Wayne effect and they haven't, and they do regress on the back of that, then they're a chance of not free falling, but if it's going to be a very close comp down the bottom, then then they're probably one of the ones that are going to be in the more favoured position for the Spoon, which is just crazy considering how good they've gone over the last 2 years. So it's going to be a very difficult market to price up, and I think we're going to have close to maybe $4 the field favourite, potentially something like that, which where you compare that to the AFL, where you'll probably have a team close to even money to run last in the Tigers, and then really only 3 chances: the Tigers, the Eagles, and the Kangaroos. And this one, I reckon there's going to be 8 teams in the betting, and might still miss the winner.
That's right. There should be a really good betting market there and good value for punters if you can find someone. And to your point, you know what happens to the sides that everyone expects to do well. There's always one that has the season from hell and gets multiple injuries, and then they're really disillusioned because they're not competing like for the title like they should be, and can really fall away, like Souths, who almost got the spoon this year, or Parramatta in a similar boat. They'll be burning the place down at Red Hell if the Broncos are in that discussion. I just wanted to ask, because that was the major news that broke 10 days ago, and very quickly Madge is on the scene in Brisbane. Did that have any effect on your premiership market?
Yeah, they firmed up. We didn't put the market up until after that news broke, but I'd suggest the fact that he's there, they're $13, they're fourth in line of betting. I reckon maybe they would be 17 if Kevy was still there. I think from a market point of view, it's a positive announcement. I think again, there's a lot of variance in that price. If they don't start well, then yeah, they've got the potential to dip out the back. But if they start and win 2 or 3 games, and everyone's going to be out there saying Madge has turned them around, and I actually would expect that they're probably going to be the best back side in the off season, in my opinion. They're sitting there at $13. It wouldn't surprise me if they start third favourite in front of the Bulldogs, who are there at the moment, because I think it's very hard to line up a team that's going to improve enough to compete with Melbourne and Penrith out of that next batch down. If everything goes right for Brisbane, we know 2 years ago they did, and they probably should have beaten them. So they're the ones that if they can get everything right, then they have got the potential to be very competitive at the end of the year. So I think there are going to be some people willing to step into that $13. There's going to be people willing to say they got no chance as well. But at $13, it doesn't take much to firm them up.
I agree with that, and the notion that Brisbane, needs to be tougher and stuff. That's all the things that Madge stands for. So everyone knows they're going to have a really tough pre-season, and it could go one of 2 ways. As you said, a lot of variance there. But if Brisbane starts strong, then everyone will say, that Madge has got them on the right track. So I could definitely see them being very well supported. And just on that premiership next year, some people will be surprised to hear, if they haven't had a look yet, that Penrith are not the favourites, a team that's won 4 straight comps. And all you need to do is pick Penrith every year and you would pick the winner. But they're not the favourites. So have you taken any bets already on that market? And can you kind of justify why Melbourne will be shorter odds?
Yeah, well, funnily enough, when I wrote a few notes about what we're going to be chatting about today, which was about an hour ago, Melbourne were $4, and I just refresh it live, and they're into $3.80. So there has been some support just in the last half an hour for the Storm. So no massive bets by any means, but I think it's probably right that Melbourne warrant being the favoured option, because Penrith we know they're losing James Fisher-Harris, who's going to be a massive loss. We know they're losing the Jerome Luai's been, and Tarava as well, and I might have missed someone. So we know they're losing players. We know the Storm now with that pain of losing the grand final are going to be, putting everything in to go one better. So I think they warrant being favourites. Melbourne, I know you can't write Penrith off because they've been in this position multiple times over the last 2 or 3 years, and they keep finding a way. So even some of the quick bringing switch of Fisher-Harris and bringing in Papali'i and those sort of things, that they just do everything so well. So the other side that we have laid at a big price, which is probably the worst way at the moment, and the one we have laid at rough odds, is South. They've gone 21 into 19. So punters are expecting that they're going to improve, and probably it's looking for that side, like I touched on with Brisbane, that can improve, but a side could improve from 12th to 6th, but they're realistically not going to challenge for the comp. But a side that's got the upside, where if they get everything right, they have got those players that can compete for the comp, which I think, realistically is Brisbane and South Sydney and maybe Canterbury, if they can if they can continue this resilient defence and find a way to compete with the big guns in attack as well. Yeah,
I don't disagree with any of those, and I think Melbourne should be favourites because Melbourne was favourite over Penrith in the grand final. And as you say, you lose Fish, Taruva, Luai. Melbourne addresses maybe the biggest weakness by getting Yuto Kamanu, which I think is going to be a massive signing. And Melbourne has no major losses. And 3 years ago, I did pick Penrith to win the comp in 21. You drew the parallels to the 2020 grand final, and Penrith lost that, but had the young team coming through. That I'm going to make the same prediction. I'll give people an early 2025 pick. I'd have to take the Storm. right, for the same reasons, that the trajectory there, and I guess it's crazy to doubt Penrith yet again, but I do doubt that they could possibly win a fifth. Not that they can't, but they're not my favourite. That's our wrap on the season. I know you only got a couple more minutes anyway, but you touched on the industry as a whole, but generally, could you just say a few words on how business has been? I know some new fee structures came in July, as you mentioned, and for the NRL itself, is the fee structure, manageable and sustainable?
Yeah, so from our perspective, there's two ways to look at the fees. You've got your race fields or sporting body fees, which is based on a combination of turnover and revenue, which are the really tricky ones to handle, particularly on a low margin sport like rugby league, which is what forced a hand to make some changes. So they've remained unchanged for the last while. But the other factor is then the point of consumption tax, which is the government levy tax, which you pay based on where a customer is located, and you pay a different rate for each state. And they're the ones that have incrementally increased over the last while. And that was sort of what I touched on a little bit earlier, where Melbourne was always known it was going to go from 10 to 15%. There was a big, strong rumour that New South Wales was going to go from 15 to 20. Now, that hasn't changed. So that's been a positive. We haven't seen any more uptick on the other states, which is positive. So we do need to hopefully start to get some downward movement on that if we're to roll back to where we were 2 or 3 years ago. But at least there's discussions being had. I think everyone understands now the importance of ensuring that you've got a quality product with strong margins that can keep customers engaged. And that's what we're working towards doing. And we have seen some positive discussions in that front anyway. So things don't happen overnight, but I just feel like the conversation's shifted from we need to constantly increase these taxes where people have seen the negative effect on what's occurring and a great example was ACT went from 15 to 25%. First time a state's ever gone to 25%. And their turnover in that state halved, which and the receipts halved, which, obviously they're a very small territory compared to a lot of the bigger places, but hopefully that's used as a barometer to show, well, these things don't work. They don't generate more money for the government. In essence, it has a worse effect because people leave the industry, and that's what we need to sort of. Hopefully, we're starting to see some positivity, and then come the new season, we can roll out some new features.
Can I ask you a question on that? So I understand it properly. Then, if the tax goes up, the percentage goes up in ACT, that means you are paying a higher amount of fees for ACT customers. So then why does their turnover go down? Because you're not going to offer them a different price to other customers?
No, and I think that's what, why it's important to use that as a barometer, because we have to then make changes, and everyone has to make changes for everyone across the nation on the back of that. So obviously there's been some downsizing in products, I would imagine. And, when you're looking at sending out retention offers or bonuses to certain customers, which, would be prevalent with a lot of those bigger operators, that if someone's based in the ACT, unfortunately, they're going to be...
They wouldn't get sent that. And then that trickles down to less turnover, less action.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, exactly. That makes sense.
And that's a big engagement tool for a lot of the bigger operators, for sure.
Okay, yeah. So the promotions and everything else that might have been available to those punters. It's a little bit like South Australia has been stricter over the years, stricter than most other states. And whenever people from South Australia would message me over the years about, deals or whatever that may have been available, and it's strict across the board now, but there was, nothing you could do for them. So that makes sense. Is there anything else you can kind of share with us in terms of plans for the remainder of spring and summer ahead?
Yeah, well, we're trying to do a few things over spring to I suppose show that there's been a positive change with Racing Victoria in what they've done with their fee structure, and it probably doesn't necessarily equate to the increase in cost that we're getting from the increase in Victorian POC, but it's a step in the right direction. So we're really trying to demonstrate some support to that change, because it's the first time in a long time on a big state area that we've seen some positive movement. So as a result, we've rolled back best of the best for a lot more of the races, where we're betting more aggressive now in the last 10 minutes on races. So if you want a fixed odds bet in that last 10 minutes, you're going to get back to the same percentages as what we were betting 2 or 3 years ago. And we're rolling out a few other things which, for the more price sensitive market, customers, then it's going to be appealing to them. And we're using that as a bit of a, I suppose, a test case to see what impact that has on both turnover, on if we can retain our margin in that space. That if we can do that, then we can roll it into the summer series for Racing Queensland, who have also been very good over the window, and then looking at what other things we can do on the sport front to be competitive. We're looking at different ways to scale and different ways that we can leverage what we're good at, which is pricing and doing that. So there's a few things that we've got on the horizon over the next bit that we're hopeful will be positive and hopefully provide customers with an enhanced product as we move into the 2025 rugby league season.
And a lot of pod followers, plenty of people love the racing, but also the American sports. And I know you've worked really hard on giving the best possible offering for same game multi-markets, for NBA, NFL, very popular, and the amount of different markets you can offer on player props that people want to build in. So they're all things people can look forward to. I'm going to kind of personally wrap this show and this season and talk a little bit more about what followers can look forward to. But to you, Tristan, I've got to let you go. So thanks again for making the time. The knowledge that you share with us, the access you give us, as well as, of course, the support to make the show possible. But I really enjoyed, having this chat for an hour about the footy and getting your insights around the industry as well.
No, thanks. Always a pleasure to come on. You do a great job. There's a great community that's been built, and yeah, we just hope that everyone's had an enjoyable season, and we'll all be back bigger and better next year. Fingers crossed.
Thanks, mate. All the best. Cheers. So thanks again to Tristan. Yeah, I thought that was a great chat about the season. Like I said, a tough season for me, but you've got to reflect on it nonetheless. And some highs and lows on both sides of the counter. So hopefully people got a bit out of that. It's great that we can have that chat with Tristan and get those insights that nobody else could answer, coming from someone that's the CEO of a bookie. So I'll just leave it this show by saying again, we've finished 49% on best bets. And I touched on this in the grand final recap, but to me, I would say in terms of how I approach each year and how I reflect on results, I mean, hitting 60% in a season, the pod we might have done 7 times out of 10, maybe 6 or 7 times out of 10. To me, that's like winning the grand final as a tipster. So a 60% season plus is like winning a grand final. 55% plus or a profitable season would be like making the finals. And a non-profitable season, probably above 50%, is like missing the 8. But 49% on best bets to me just feels like copping a wooden spoon, honestly. So it's a brutal feeling, and it's a major feeling of disappointment. But I suppose I've showed to people that it can happen to anyone, and you've got to sort of remain calm throughout it and not change anything too drastically. Although people would argue that, like, when your results aren't there, you need to change your process up. And I can promise you, it's certainly something that I use the off season to look at. If we run the TryPod back beyond 10 years, the number one goal, as it always has been, is to deliver the highest quality tips. Everything else is kind of secondary, right? The show is built around sharp tips and getting results for people that tune in. And we value you guys so much. So everything I do and everything I look at is going to be around, how I could do that, in a better way if I bring the show back. Otherwise, it wouldn't be worth doing. So thanks to everyone that did, tune in. It, means a lot to us. The best bet results is the low point for me, but I have to, again, thank Clarkey for all of his efforts this season and celebrate that he did finish plus 13.5 units in track tips, which is no joke. Same game multis, I'm proud of that we got plus 23, plus 24 units, did exceptionally well. And that's a higher margin market to beat. It's tough. And you would think that if I'm picking the best bets that badly, that I always tried to build the same gamers around my most confident best bets. So it shouldn't have probably been a profitable season, but it's just the variance that goes into it. You can have a different year where you can win 60 or 60+% best bets, and somehow the same gamers, you just never get that try score you wanted to line up. So it can go the other way too, right? So Nicole did exceptional, and I really thought he added a lot to the show with his try score tips, and this is me adapting the content, hopefully, to what you guys want. So let me know what you want more of or less of. People love their try scorer tips more than ever. They love their same game multis, so I've tried to build it in. You know, what Benny Howard did this year at the other end of the spectrum with his best bets gone to like 20-3 is crazy. And he's been a member of the group for a long time, sharing all those tips and write-ups for free. So those were like a lot of the positives that added to the show. And so I thank it, you know, all those guys for their contribution. I love the American sports, as you know. The NFL's underway. Actually, next thing on the agenda might be an NBA season preview. People have been messaging me, so I will do one of those. I think I actually saw Tuller in the comments. So Tuller and I will work together and give you another NBA season preview. We've done really well in some in the past. Nettie is delivering Nettie Given Sunday every week. I don't even know if Nettie's had a losing week yet after 5 weeks of NFL. Nettie's also over 60%. So check that out. Drops on the TryPod Facebook page every Sunday. Nettie, and Nettie typically gives 10 to 20 NFL picks, right? Sides, totals, and props. So, and Nettie's been going, I think this is his 10th season as well. We've been mates going back before the pod, and Nettie was one of the very first people to get involved. And in terms of beyond that, I'll say again, grateful for everyone that tunes in, and it's a privilege to bring this content to you. And stay tuned in terms of what we do next and what else we might be bringing out. But thanks for joining for the ride this year. As Tuller is in the chat, so shout out to Tuller. He says the same game margins was not too high of a margin to the master winning. Kind words, mate. I can't wait to collaborate with Tuller for NBA. That's going to be one of my major focuses moving forward. And other than that, guys, thanks again. Take care of yourselves. Stay tuned and Lego.